Thank you, Chair. Good morning, conference and our welcome guests. It's again a great privilege to be here reporting on our work over the last 12 months, especially as we celebrate Black History Month. Firstly, a correction to the annual report, which says that former Vice Chair Finance Keith Stockheld resigned last year, when in fact his term of office had come to an end. Aside from the state of the economy, and more on that in a while, we have seen many dreadful events of late, compounded by the genocidal onslaught by Russia against Ukraine, which has cost tens of thousands of lives on both sides of that dreadful conflict, which now threatens to escalate even further westwards. We live in dark times. Oppression is all around us. And as you will hear from Mariella Cohon a little later, it's significant that in many countries, it's women who are showing the courage and tenacity to face down those forces of authority. And we commend all of those brave people engaged in such struggles. During this time, we have also seen the loss of Queen Elizabeth, and irrespective of your loyalty to the monarchy or otherwise, one is entitled to ask how all the pomp of ceremony and huge expense to the taxpayer could possibly be justified over such an inordinately long period. Especially when many of the late Queen's loyal subjects were struggling to put food on the table, struggling to cope with huge rises in the cost of living and retain already insecure jobs. We obviously wish King Charles III the best of luck, and we hope that he would deeply reflect on what's actually happening across his kingdom right now. Maybe he will lead by example and cut his costs and the cost to the taxpayer by travelling to his coronation in a taxi. This morning, I want to focus on four key themes. The main aspects of our work that we've been doing for and with our members across probation, CAFGAS and Probation Northern Ireland, our campaigns against racism and discrimination of all forms, in and outside of the workplace, and especially our work on anti-racism. And then finally, I would like to say a few words about the future direction of this great union and professional association as we start laying the foundations for a new era in our history. First, the economy, and this has to have been the most remarkable 12 months in politics that many of us will ever have experienced. A government enjoying a seemingly insurmountable 80-seat majority following its election in 2019, having received just 44% of the popular vote. We're now facing political meltdown if the opinion polls are to be believed. The former Prime Minister, surely the worst in living memory, well, at least until the start of September anyway, embroiled in one scandal after another and ultimately a victim of public indignation and the anger of his own Conservative Party members and cabinet ministers. Well, he may have departed. There will be many people whose loved ones were among the 180,000 plus mortalities since the onset of the COVID pandemic, who will expect the public inquiry that's just gone underway to call him and his wretched government to account for their shameful mishandling of the crisis. This departure, of course, led to what must go down in history as the most self-aggrandizing election processes, or should I say circuses, that we will ever witness. A long, hot summer, notable for the absence of any meaningful sign of political leadership, with the remaining loyalists not even managing a passable impression of being in charge of anything. But cometh the hour, cometh the one hero to emerge from the farce. For while others dawdled or sunned themselves in exotic climes as the country headed to hell on a handcart, he alone stuck it out at Westminster, keeping calm and carrying on, just as you would expect from a senior civil servant. Yes, you've guessed it. We're honoured to have him join us virtually today. So would you all give a rousing reception to Larry the Cat? Okay, it's not an exact match. Give me a break. Okay? And I know I shouldn't work with animals and children, but you know, this is different. So all credit to Larry for hanging in there and going about his business. And I'm sure you'll have seen it as he now has his own very special media social media platform, and two posts stand out for me. One where he reported that it could only catch mice to reach his rodent targets at 10 Downing Street. This on account of the rats having left said premises during the summer. And the other being his revelation that during the pandemic, while millions of people were locked down, his house was frequently used as a nightclub. He's since further revealed that although pretty much empty during the summer, it is now being used as a casino. And that sums up the approach to this government's trickle-down economic policy. The same old-foul policies, but only with new players at the roulette table, spread betting their way to disaster with our money. Well, you don't need me to rehearse the economic critiques that are raining down daily on the beleaguered Prime Minister and Chancellor. But let's admit, they have certainly delivered. Record inflation, a record collapse of the pound, and record increases in rents and mortgages. Now, notwithstanding the energy crisis exacerbated by Putin's neo-imperialist and obscene war, we are witnessing the results of a failure in planning, a failure of political courage, and a failure to recognise the stark choices facing many of the British public this winter, which is essentially heat or eat. It's why enough is enough. And it's why, on a morning when we hear that Royal Mail has just announced a shameful cut of 10,000 jobs, why Napo, via the TUC, via the TUCG, will do all it can to support that campaign. And you can show your support in the photo shoot at lunchtime, please. In the coming months, we need to see hundreds of thousands of people out there in our communities, out there on the streets, helping to heap pressure on this miserable inept government and helping, we hope, to bring about a speedier general election than Liz Truss thinks is going to happen. And we hope that will be the final and long overdue chapter to bring those who have masterminded the economic failures of the last 12 years fully to account. Meanwhile, back in the real world where our members go about their work, I want to place on record my deep appreciation to the families of those of our members who have lost their lives this past year, be it as a result of the pandemic or through natural causes, but also to the family of one of our members who this year took their own life. It's a shocking story, but because of the impending inquest, I'm limited in saying some of the things that I would like to. But it stirs up memories, you'll recall them, of those heart-rending losses that we heard about several years ago during transforming rehabilitation. A life cut short because that member was unable to cover 2 jobs. A wasted life because nobody listened to their desperate pleas for support, leaving them in dread of an impossible workload and in sheer terror at the implications for public safety. It's one of the most shameful examples of an employer's abrogation of their responsibilities that I have ever seen. And in my contact with the victim's partner, I have pledged as much support that Napo can reasonably provide to the family through Parliament and the media as they rightly seek answers and seek justice for their loved one. COVID is still with us, of course, not that you would know it by some attitudes that we sadly encounter and challenge, but were it not for the work carried out by our health and safety representatives across those employers where we're represented, the attrition rate would have been far worse. And I think we should show our support for the efforts of our health and safety reps. Our reps in probation, CAFGAS and probation Northern Ireland continue to do wonderful things on behalf of our members. And our members have also contributed to the many discussions that we have organised. Our engagement with members has been quite astonishing during this period of difficulty. We've reported to you on important issues such as pay and pay restructuring, harmonisation of terms and conditions, and our equality initiatives. That increase in engagement is another of the reasons why we've seen 200 new members join us over the last month. On the issue of probation pay, as Katie said yesterday, we demonstrated accountability by engaging with over 1,700 members during and immediately after the ballot result. It was an offer that, from the feedback we received, was universally seen as disappointing at best and insulting at worst. And we acknowledge that. But the view of your negotiating committee and NEC was that it was the best offer that we could secure by negotiation with the employer, and one which may well have been withdrawn completely by the incoming Prime Minister had we not put that to a ballot when we did. But some members have understandably made the point that many sister trade unions have been or are in struggle, and of course we send our support to all of them, but that we should have been too. Well, let me address that head on by saying that in almost all cases, the current range of industrial disputes are against the employers who possess the latitude to negotiate and do something. Whereas, in the case of probation senior management, all negotiating options had been exhausted. And as we made clear, and as Katie and I made clear, that dispute then would have been directly with this government. And that was the background to the tough decision made by members, rather than give us the authority to proceed towards an industrial strategy against the government. But as I said directly to the Director General, Amy Rees, the employer should take no comfort from the ballot result. And senior management's disgraceful spin during the ballot period that this represented a good offer has merely fueled discontent among its staff. In Cafcass, we still await a pay offer. And unless a miracle occurs, it's likely our members there and those in unison will have to consider the same stark choice in the ballot. Meanwhile, our members responded well to the latest plans by the employer, which they claim will provide new development and reskilling opportunities to our practitioners. But we're consulting members to see if they believe that as well, or whether it's just more smoke and mirrors from Cafcass. And we also bid farewell, because it's an opportunity to do so, to 3 stalwart activists from the family court section who are retiring, in the form of Peter Brooks, Sue Hassel, and Jay Barlow, who you paid tribute to last year. I offer them heartfelt personal thanks for the support to me over many years, but for what they have done for Cafcass members and thousands of families and children in their work. In Northern Ireland, excellent progress has been made to build a compelling case to modernise the pay structure. And Katie and I want to record our appreciation to Napo reps Fiona Vaughan, but hopefully has joined us online again today, and Jem White for their tremendous contribution to the negotiating process. As Katie has said, we have more big campaigns ahead of us in the form of 1HM PPS and a threat to the promise of no frontline cuts in staffing if this government, if it lasts, moves to resurrect Margaret Thatcher's cuts to all public spending. Some of you will remember that period as well. And further, the monstrously stupid single intervention in parole board hearings by the Secretary of State for Justice, along with the further assault on the integrity of our members who deliver interventions and programmes with the intention to downgrade this work. Well, you will debate this subject a little later. But meanwhile, let me make it very clear to senior management, some of whom are here today, and as I said, you're very welcome, that we have a line in the sand on this issue. And our message to them is, don't do it. Don't even think about it any longer. Reverse your direction of travel now or face the real prospect of sustained industrial action going forward. Conference, our members have had enough of being undervalued and scapegoated due to the employer's failure to protect the probation profession from previous government ministers who seemingly know the price of everything, but in truth know the value of nothing. And one campaign in particular that I've been very proud to have been part of is the Anti-Racism Task Force set up by the TUC 2 years ago, and which will be reporting to next week's Congress. Its work across 4 areas of organising, collective bargaining, trade unions as employers and public policy has been groundbreaking, and there will be a series of recommendations presented to Congress, which I'll be publishing in full to all our members. Unfortunately, and despite the immense value of this project, there is one inescapable conclusion that has been reached, which is that racism in and outside of the workplace still exists in our society. Moreover, that too many people in positions of authority refuse to recognise the problem. And it's not just about racism, because just months after the brutal murder of Sarah Everard at the hands of a serving police officer, new evidence emerges of racism, homophobia and misogyny among police officers from the very same unit as the perpetrator. We've got a lot of work to do still. And Napo's own contribution and our own work by way of our anti-racism roadshows, which are brilliantly delivered by Assistant General Secretary Ranjit Singh and Sharina Suleiman, in partnership with Senior Probation Management, credit to them for their involvement. It's just one of a number of initiatives and good practice benchmarks that will be appearing in our motion to Congress next week. Look, following the shocking thematic report by the probation inspector about race in the probation service, Napo and our sister unions and staff networks have developed an action plan which has been fully supported by the employer. But there's a continuing problem and it needs to be addressed and quickly. Incredibly, in staff engagement events organised by the probation service, we have seen racist trolling take place. Unbelievable. What's more unbelievable is that these people have retained anonymity when doing so. Well, I can't believe for one moment that any of those people are among our membership. But let me say this, if they are, there's no place for them in this trade union. So we have challenged senior management to, in future, forbid any staff from taking part in future events of this type, unless and until they agree to provide their name and workplace. Because I have another message. There's no hiding place for racists, whoever and wherever they are. And if management won't act to stamp it out, we will hunt them down ourselves. Well, racism in society isn't going away very soon. And when it comes from the highest levels of government, I despair. As no sooner have we seen the back of the most racist Home Secretary in decades in Priti Patel, we see her replaced by Suella Braverman, whose stated dream at the Tory party conference, if you've not picked it up, was to get the first flight of deported refugees packed off to Rwanda, a country itself with a very dodgy human rights record, as you well know. Just like unwanted cargo. What has it come to? Where is the debate about a humane method of helping people in desperation? A humane method to allow people safe passage to our shores and other countries willing to take part. Where's that discussion? It's absent. Instead, dogma, racism, and failed solutions are all that's on offer. So it's an utter disgrace. But really, why should we be surprised at that? When we have a government whose modus operandi on race and a host of other issues is straight out of the Little Britain playbook. Finally, let's take a quick look at the future ahead of us. And if you allow me, my future as well, because it's probably one of the last opportunities we'll get to do that for a few months anyway. In her superb address to AGM yesterday, Katie spoke of the importance of hope and how we should deploy that most precious of commodities as we seek to build on the momentum of those welcome new members, increase our income and help to sustain Napo into the future. And with an eye to what was reported to you yesterday, we're heading in the right direction financially from the desperate position we were in 5 years ago. We're in the right direction, more needs to be done. But as Carol said, we need more members. Those 200 new members that we reported, it's worth about £50,000 a year in income. Every branch can recruit 10, 20 members. That's going to make a big difference to our income. Conference, when I was appointed as Assistant General Secretary back in 2008, little did I realise what the future would hold. Within 4 years, I unexpectedly became Acting General Secretary, helping to see us through the start of the darkest period in our illustrious history. In the years afterwards, we, that's you and me, successive officers and our staff, faced a whole series of what I can only describe as poisoned chalices. Firstly came the spectre of TR and the launch of the biggest campaign of opposition we had ever mounted, including the unsuccessful judicial review, which cost us £500,000. That was the decision of the members that we proceed down that route, ultimately unsuccessful. but worse still, a further award against us of £250,000 in costs. A very real threat to our existence at that time, but one which happily, because we had friends that could understand that, we were able to negotiate that down to a fraction of that amount. Straight after that came Grayling's revenge, you remember, against our campaigning efforts, as he cancelled the facility for Chekhov. That cost us 300 members, despite all the efforts we made. Then the implementation of TR itself, the creation of the CRC estate, and with it the launch of the National Probation Service. Total abject chaos, which you suffered personally. Add to that then the onset of the E3 project. Remember that one? Which from memory stood for excellence, sufficiency, and what was the third? Excrement, was it? Certainly according to our long-suffering members. All this followed by 7 long years of tenacious campaigning in Parliament and the media, resulting in a famous victory to reunify probation, but one that we can't afford to dwell upon because we well recognise, don't we, the myriad challenges we are facing now and face in the future. What a shambles it was, but we tried to get it put right. We now have to glue it together, and that's not easy, but with your help, I know we can. And were it not for the likes of politicians, sensible politicians, unlike the ones that you see before you these days, people like David Gork, Rory Stewart, Bob Neal, Lucy Fraser, all Tories, but who supported us and listened to us, along with the help of colleagues in both houses, had to admit how wrong the government had been. But that era is behind us, and we move inexorably towards new frontiers and serious future challenges for our members in probation, CAFGAS, and PBNI. And I would like to have the privilege of helping to lead us into that new era. And I'll therefore be seeking your support into a 3rd term of office. But in doing so, and if I am successful, it is my intention to make way for a successor before that term of office concludes. Or I'll be carried off on my shield if the worst should happen. Ultimately, and whatever my personal intentions, my future is one that our members will rightly determine through our democratic processes. And let me say this, that even if the Constitution Amendment that's down for debate later had meant that I wouldn't need to stand for a 3rd term of office, it doesn't mean that, it affects me in no way whatsoever, I would still have said what I've said. I would still have offered myself through an election process into a 3rd term, because you, the members, should have that right. I remember saying soon after I become your new GS that even in the face of severe adversity, I was no quitter. And that's as true today as it was back then. I also said that despair is manageable, but it's a lack of hope that is fatal. So there you have it. There's serious work still to be done, and I want to work with you for the foreseeable future, with hope, with confidence, and a determination to see us into that new and exciting future. Thank you so much for your support over these past years. But more importantly, thanks for your loyalty to this union and professional association. Hopefully I'll be back here for the next AGM. But whatever happens, serving our members has been and still is the greatest privilege and honour that I've experienced in my working life. Thank you.